The sabotaging of ballots is something that federal officials are warning about in a new bulletin. CBS Nicole's Ganga is here with more on these threats. What are you hearing from officials?
Nora, in Vancouver, Washington, officials say hundreds of ballots were destroyed when they went up in smoke after a fire suppression system inside this ballot box did not work as it should have. A small number of ballots were also damaged in Portland, Oregon. Investigators believe this vehicle is connected to both fires, and they're investigating a third similar incident at another nearby ballot box earlier this month. This as the Department of Homeland Security warns some individuals online are now calling for the sabotage of ballot drop boxes, circulating their methods on forums typically used by domestic violent extremists. A federal bulletin published today and obtained by CBS News assesses that threat actors are likely to leverage claims of election fraud to drive violence before and after Election Day. But Nora, police in Washington State and Oregon say they've stepped up patrols around these ballot boxes, adding that election offices there are safer today than they have ever been before.
Welcome everyone to the Hurting Humanity channel. You are going to continue to hear stories about ballot box tampering, illegal immigrants voting, Russia collusion, and of course this is all to sow discord and distrust with the current voting system. Because this whole thing, if you haven't been paying attention, is about changing infrastructure, bringing in a digital infrastructure. And the only way they can do that is via sabotage. So the left and the right are working together to sabotage. But remember, they still need you to go vote because it's very important for you to consent. They want you to vote to be governed. You're voting for your consent of the governed. It's no different than signing a contract when you go buy your newest cell phone or anything else that they ask you to sign a contract for. And that's why it's very important to pay attention to the stories that are out there involving the ballot boxes, because this is part of the psyop. And that's why you heard in that news clip how important it was to let you know that there's people out there who are colluding, who are trying to burn ballots to rig the election. But they want you to know it's still safer than ever for you to go and vote, for you to go drop your vote in a mailbox somewhere, because it's still important at the same time to convince you that people are blowing up ballot boxes to make sure you still go and consent to everything that's about to come. So what is about to come? When I talk about the word conspire in a recent video, I said the definition of that is people working together to bring about a particular result, typically to someone's detriment. The detriment is coming to us. The people working together are the Republicans and the Democrats who have already sold us out completely. And what they want to do is implement this digital public infrastructure. And it can't be emphasized enough. They have distracted you. They have baited you into getting so obsessed with one political party versus the other. They have divided the human race like never before, thanks to really the technology that's in place. Of course, it's the same technology that they want to use to enslave us. But there's a reason that they've kept people trapped in the left-right paradigm. There's a reason that the alt-right media plays to people's emotions, but keeps everything going on in their mind at nonsensical issues like, can men have babies? What is a woman? These are all deliberate talking points to keep you at surface-level thinking. When they talk about Klaus Schwab, when they talk about the globalists, when they talk about the World Economic Forum, they don't want you thinking deeper. They just want you to think it's about a bunch of people in the deep state, and that you have to remember that Donald Trump is going to be there to stop it from happening, instead, of course, of an actual revolution from occurring, because that's the last thing that they could possibly have happen, is a revolution, a real revolution, which would take the civilians rising up together. They want you invested in the political party because they control the political party. So the media out there is never going to bring attention to how this entire thing revolves around a digital ID. They're implementing digital public infrastructure. I've shown you how many times, I can't even tell you, how many times I've talked about the real core message of the World Economic Forum is implementing AI governance, digital governance. We've heard people talk about smart cities, but not understand or think any deeper than that. And this is all about a digital ID. It's all any of it has been about. You have to remember in their books that they teach in their secret societies, books like The Protocols of the Elders of Zion, they talk about us as if we're cattle. And if you actually think about how cattle and livestock actually live in this world, that's how they want us to live. This is about getting you tagged like cattle. Because if you never noticed before, cattle have tags on them. Animals, even in national parks, have tags on them. And with these tags now, they have digital tags on them. And what do these digital tags allow them to do? It allows them to monitor where their cattle are at all times. Monitoring where the cattle are. Are they all in the same location? Have any of them actually gone missing? That's what they do with cattle. And if you haven't noticed, they've been conditioning you into actually being prepared to live that way. Because if you haven't noticed, this technology that's come out, things like the Fitbit, the Apple Watch, where they're monitoring your steps, where you're used to tracking your own movement, tracking your calories, tracking every little thing that the watch can possibly track, how you're sleeping at night, your actual heart rate. Do you think that they created that because they want you to live longer? Because they want you to know what's going on inside? They created that because they're preparing you to live like that. Because this entire thing is all about a digital ID. And every single movement that you make, just like cattle, is going to be tracked by a digital ID. Every movement you make, everything you buy, every word you say. And that is why all of these dual narratives happening at once are very important to pay attention to. Now, they've gotten you conditioned with things like the iPhone. They've gotten you conditioned with biometrics, like having to use facial ID to get into your phone or use your thumbprint to get in your phone. The more you do it, the more desensitized you get, the more conditioned you get into transitioning into that becoming the new normal. And to do that, they have to create psychological news stories. And I call them psyops, and that's what we've always called them, psychological operations, to make you want what they want you to have already. Because would you go and tag yourself the way that a cattle or a cow or anything out there, livestock, is tagged on the ear? Would you do that to yourself willingly? Well, probably not. So what do? They use psychological operations to convince you into putting this technology on your skin, to eventually putting this technology under your skin. And then around all that stuff, at the same time, you hear all this noise about illegal immigrants crossing over the border, how we can't track them, about how states like California and just randomly some select states are going to allow people to vote without actually bringing an ID. Then they get you emotionally invested to where you're getting frustrated because you're going to the grocery store and you can't afford to buy certain things anymore. You don't have any money saved up in your bank account. You're saying, we got to change presidents, or we got to do this. Our vote counts, because they're telling you that you're empowered and you can do something about this. And of course, that's how the psyop works. Because the more emotionally invested you get in thinking that your vote counts, when they start pulling the carpet out from under your feet in the next 10 days and start telling you that there's election interference, that illegal immigrants' votes counted for X amount in this county and X amount in that county, and it might sway the whole election, you feel like you're getting screwed. You feel like, I went and voted. That's not fair that these people don't even live here should vote, and they were paid and bribed by these people to vote. We need to do something about it now. This can't continue on. We need to change the infrastructure. And that's why conveniently people like Elon Musk in the past have tweeted out in the USA, you don't need government issued ID to vote, and you can mail in your ballot. This is insane. Because you need people on both sides. Because if the ultimate goal is to bring about a digital ID, they can't have it once again turn out like it did during the outbreak, where there was people who were fully aligned against putting something inside their body that they didn't want to versus other people who willingly wanted to poison their own bodies. In this case, they don't want you to even see what the actual agenda is. And that's why Elon Musk is working with the conservatives and Bill Gates and these other psychopaths in Silicon Valley come out as Democrats. And at the same time, you look at Elon Musk and how into this race he is. You look at things like, I'm increasingly convinced that Neuralink should prioritize making implants that can eliminate back and neck pain. And you need to start thinking to yourself, look how they're aligning you. They're getting you on board to go forward with their insane technology that's going to change what it means to even be a human being because they've got you so in an uproar over nonsensical issues, things that we shouldn't be debating and we shouldn't be talking about. And what should really occur is a real revolution should be occurring. The civilians should be protesting on all sides against this entire corporation known as the United States government. They shouldn't be fighting among each other. They shouldn't be debating about kids getting castrated. They should be saying that this needs to stop, that we are under psychological attack on a day in, day out basis, where we have our own government telling us that our next door neighbor is now known as a terrorist. These are things they're deliberately doing, and they're distracting you so that you don't realize that it's always been about a digital ID. If you don't remember during the outbreak, listen to them out of their own mouths about how they wanted you to get a digital passport / digital certificate, and they even threw things in there talking about immigration because they were hinting at how this thing was going to move forward to convince you every way they possibly can that we need to move forward with implementing a digital public infrastructure.
And of course, we need some sort of digital certificate because we're likely to say to people working in nursing homes or hospitals or maybe even schools that they need to authenticate that they've been, and even travel will have some of that. So it's exciting.
We'll have to have certificates of who's a recovered person, who's a vaccinated person, because you don't want people moving around the world where you'll have some countries that won't have it under control. Sadly, you don't want to completely block off the ability for those people to go there and come back and move around.
People to go there and come back and move around. So eventually there will be sort of this digital immunity proof that will help facilitate the global reopening up.
When I started this job, there were actually very little countries in Africa or Latin America that had one ubiquitous type of ID, and certainly that it was digital, and certainly that it was biometric. And we really work with all our partners to actually help that being, to grow this. And the interesting part of it is that, yes, it is very necessary for financial services, but not only. It's also good for school enrollment, it's also good for health, who actually got it or not. It's very good to actually to get your subsidies, from the government.
For people to actually have a biometric identity, which can say, look, I've been tested, or I've had the disease and here are my antibodies, so that life can get back to normal. So your digital ID can play a part, but also, if you think of the transactions that you want to do now with your customers, it's much simpler for them if they have a digital identity. Or you take the big issue in the Western world today, which is, I would say, is worries about immigration, who has the right to be in your country, who has the right not to be. Without a form of identity, it's very hard to tell who's got a right to be in a country, who's not. So worries about immigration, who has the right to be in your country, who has the right not to be. Without a form of identity, it's very hard to tell who's got a right to be in a country, who's not.
So again, even while they were talking about how we needed to have that in place so that we could see who has it and who doesn't have it, who was getting on a plane, who had it and who didn't have it, how it was transmitting. They were still hinting at you about immigration because they knew that it was going to take steps to get this put in place, and it was going to take psyop after psyop after psyop. It was going to take things like a governor in California telling people that they could just show up there without an ID, which pretty much means that a 15-year-old could probably show up there and actually vote. People who aren't supposed to vote can actually vote. People who don't live in America can have a say in the election. Of course, the normal response from civilians in America while they're bleeding money out of their wallet is going to be, this is ridiculous and this is insane, and that's what they want you to say because they want to come in and say, okay, this isn't a Trump issue, this isn't a Kamala issue, this is just an overall infrastructure issue, and we need to change the infrastructure. And they want both sides of the aisle to agree to it, and that's why they've quietly been working on bringing about this digital ID without you even realizing it. And from that point, where somebody out there might say, hey, we need a digital ID, because they want you to say you need a digital ID, because if they get you so caught up in the psyop that you feel like this isn't fair, then my vote's not actually counting, and I'm a hardworking American. Why do these illegals get why are we not tracking these criminals crossing the border? We're going to need something in place because they're making you feel so unsafe. They're making you feel like you're getting screwed over that you're going to say, can you somebody do something? They're like, this is what we're going to do, right? Donald Trump could call it a different thing than the digital ID, could have his own name for it. The libs could have their own name for it. The simple fact is they need it in place because they can't tag the entire world without everybody and this infrastructure being completely changed and everybody being brought in to this digital infrastructure. You have to participate in the digital infrastructure. They need you on board with it, and they're going to convince you of it. And they can't just bring about all this change by saying, hey, we would like to change the way that all of you live. We're all of a sudden going to nuke the way you live. No more driver's license. You got to get a phone. You got to have this. You got to have that. Because people would say, no, that's not fair. Things are fine. My life is fine. I don't need this. I'm busy. Stop it. But they're meddling in your life so much, and they're causing so many psyops at once that they're getting you to actually ask for what they wanted from the get-go. And for anybody out there that doesn't understand what this leads to, if you think this is really about tracking criminals, and you think this is about tracking who really votes or who's really in a country who's not supposed to be, of course it has zero to do with that, because globalism is a global world order. It's about tracking every single individual. Now, of course, that means there's going to be different rights for different individuals. People like me and you aren't going to be able to travel anywhere. And of course, they're going to give things to people who consent to all the things that they're doing, who kiss their rear end, who don't question what's actually happening. They'll allow them to travel freely and still be a slave to them, but they'll give them a little allowance time like a prisoner in a prison yard, right? But what this is really about, and what this leads towards, is once the digital ID is in place, right? Once we get these psyops that come out of this election, and they start bringing about, hey, we've got to change the infrastructure, this isn't going to work, and this is all scripted out, so it's coming. Then it turns into, once it's in place, we start building out other psyops, and that's what they're going to do. It'll be in place, and then they'll start talking about things that will concern you, like deepfakes, like people pretending to be people they're not. You may have noticed these stories that are out there about bullies online and people harming themselves because people are pretending to be somebody that they're not. You may have heard stories about social media sites like YouTube trying to silence people who remain anonymous, right? Because it's a bad thing to be anonymous, because then they can't actually track who's saying what, and they're convincing you that it's a bad thing to be anonymous, that every single thing you say and do needs to be tracked and monitored. By who? Well, by them. And here they are telling you about it, even included in Australia. I put a clip in there about social media security. No matter what your take is on politics, left, right, whatever you get suckered into, think about some of the things you might write online, whether you're trolling someone like me or not. All of these things are going to have a footprint on it, which means you could be criminally liable for something that you write online. In other words, you could say something to someone, I don't like how you look, and that person could end up doing something bad, whether it's themselves or somebody else. And guess what? You're going to be held accountable criminally. Because this is what the thought police is, and this is what they want to bring in.
Every country struggling to find that boundary. The U.S. is a tough one because, we have the notion of the First Amendment. And so what are the exceptions? Like yelling fire in a theater, and because you're anonymous online, it can be worse. I do think over time, with things like deep fakes, most of the time you're online, you're going to want to be in an environment where the people are truly identified. That is, they're connected to a real world identity that you trust instead of just people saying whatever they want. And so the idea of provenance, who sent me this email, was that really them? We're going to have systems and behaviors that we're more aware of. Okay, who says that? Who created this?
A radical plan to crack down on social media abuse is being considered by the federal government. For more Nines, Oliver Haig joins us live in Adelaide. Ollie, how will it work?
Lila, good morning. Essentially, it will work the same as a passport. Australians forced to submit 100 points of identification, like their driver's license or passport, when using social media accounts like Facebook and Twitter. Now, police will have access to those social media accounts, and it's all part of a crackdown on online abuse. Now, users could be liable for defamation suits or even criminal prosecution. It's all part of a plan hoping to deter people from engaging in bad behaviour. Now, the recommendations were handed down by a federal parliamentary inquiry. They're reforms that are being considered by the Morrison government, with the chairman saying there is merit to remove the veil of being anonymous.
So in addition to those things, if you're starting to understand how this all works together, they do all these psyops around the vote, get people on both sides on board with the digital ID, then start saying, well, there's deepfakes, well, there's people who are writing things online about school events, and we got to track this because then we can catch them ahead of time. If somebody posts online anonymously, which is why you heard these stories that have come out of some of these school events in the last year, where, there's been weird online behavior, where somebody's posted, and the signs were there, and nobody stopped them because they were online anonymously. Well, that's, of course, to make sure you're not online anonymously. That's what the digital infrastructure is. And, of course, this is ultimately for them, not just about tagging us and having control, but it's also about making sure that nobody speaks out against them and that nobody wakes up to what's really going on and they stay dulled asleep in this dystopian hell. But I want to play for you this other clip that's important. Because tied into all of this, if you actually connect the dots and understand how this works, is the carbon footprint. You see, the alt-right media doesn't explain any of this stuff to anyone out there. That's why you see the MAGA people who even show up on my channel. They're so surface level, they're worse than the liberals. They come over here and they're like, they don't even listen to what's being said because they can't grasp the notion that their vote doesn't count. They can't grasp the notion that to actually stop what's happening, you voting is going to do zero. That we actually have to go back to the revolutionary type of days and do something about it. We actually have to stop them from moving forward. And really, you don't have to do anything with violence. You could just stop consenting to it. You could stop participating. You could throw away and burn your phone and your computer and say, I'm not going online anymore. In fact, I'm going to learn trades now. I'm going to learn trades so that I don't have to go anymore to Walmart and buy, laundry detergent or buy these things that they're marking up so high in price that I can't even afford to buy it anymore. We shouldn't need to buy it in the first place. You should be able to do these things on your own. They just don't want you to be self-dependent. They want you to be dependent on them. And this all comes down to the climate agenda. This all comes down to the carbon footprint. Now, Bill Gates, and I'll play for you this clip now, recently was talking about tracking farmers. How much are they farming? What are they farming? What are they selling? Tracking everything. Because remember, they want full control over everything, including agriculture. Everything, including every breath you take, including the guy who was talking at the World Economic Forum, who's got a face like a punching bag, who was telling us about how neat it was going to be able to track everybody's carbon emissions. And still, it's not clicking in people's heads when they hear carbon emissions that they're talking about you, how much air you're emitting, how many steps you're taking. This is the effect on the climate, and you need to change your behavior.
Another place that India leads, but there's a lot more that all of you can be involved in driving forward, is this digital public infrastructure. No country is more able to take government benefits and get them out efficiently and effectively to their citizens than India. You would have expected rich countries or others to do that, but in fact, they did not. And so that basic structure that starts with identity and bank accounts and payments is just foundational. And as part of this visit, I'm now seeing how that foundation is being built out in agriculture with profiles of farmers to understand what they need and give them advice, built out with health records so that we can help people not only with infectious diseases, but the challenge that's coming in the future with the growth of the non-communicable diseases being a huge thing. And that digital public infrastructure will help us with these climate problems. I was in Odisha yesterday, and what they showed is that they've registered the farmers and registered what type of crops they grow and what land they own. They literally have a control center. When you walk in, you think, wow, this is agriculture, but you've got a command center and maps and people doing queries and sending out messages. And so that all starts